If you love women, does that mean you hate trans people? What do we make of J.K. Rowling now? Donald Trump has signed an executive order protecting women's sports and female sports. One of the moments that changed my perspective on this subject was this simple question. Why have women's sports at all? Why have them? Because presumably it's a separate category in some way, and some biologists believe that at every measurable level there are differences between men and women, whether that's bone density or their blood or their hair or it's just completely measurable. Having said that, as a spiritual man and a believer in God, there are some things that cannot be measured. Something like essence, some subtle forms of energy that are difficult to discern using purely material means. So how does the issue of gender get used in the culture? How is it deployed by both sides of the cultural argument to push home their claims for moral superiority? One of the people that's been very outspoken on this issue from the get-go is J.K. Rowling. She made this post about Donald Trump signing the executive order protecting women's sports. Now, that is notable for a number of reasons. For one thing, Donald Trump is surrounded by female children and isn't sniffing any of them on the head. That seems to be an advance for presidential politics, if nothing else. Let's have a look at the legacy media news coverage of Donald Trump signing that executive order before discussing more generally gender and women's sports and how this issue gets used politically to divide people and obfuscate truth.
You know, if you'd like to gather around me, I think I'm going to be okay. Come on. Come on.
Wherever you are politically, wherever you are on the political spectrum, it's difficult not to make assessments of people based on your own intuitive sense of whether or not you think you would like them. When you see Donald Trump doing that, do you find it difficult to just kind of conjure up hatred and go like, oh, he must be a horrible, evil, racist, rapist person? You sort of see him around children and you think, hold on a minute, he seems really nice. Now, I can almost feel people that are determined to continue to dislike Donald Trump saying, well, Adolf Hitler was good with children. Adolf Hitler loved his dog Blondie. And at that point, you have to kind of acknowledge that you're enjoying hating someone. It's just something you like doing. It's not really based on reason. And almost at this point, how are any of us supposed to unpick the impact of propaganda on our own apparently personal perspectives on a variety of issues, whether that's Donald Trump as an individual or the complex subject of gender and gender politics? We have now reverted, as a result of the rise of the MAGA movement and Trump's presidency, to there are two genders. There are men and women.
Secret Service is worried about them?
That kind of stuff is what I like about Donald Trump. Like, it sounds like someone in the background is going, oh no, you weren't meant to do this. Secret Service is worried about them. Like, there could be like a tiny little spy with a Sharpie pen with a blow dart in it. Got him. Ah! Oh no, my ear.
If we have to worry about them, we have big problems. Okay, do you want to have a film? Do you want to do this? Watch what I do, and then I'm going to give you some pens, okay?
I'm assessing here the easy affability of a figure like Trump that seems to me to be at odds with the declaration that he is sort of evil. If you watch someone like Keir Starmer and see how he is around people, there's a kind of resolute awkwardness, an inability to be at ease around people. And that don't mean that he's a bad person, but I would say it's likely that he's hiding something. He's not at ease. He's not fully comfortable with who he is. You all remember Joe Biden, or the variety of Joe Biden. Sometimes it appeared he had stand-ins sniffing around kids' heads, saying weird stuff all the time. Or Kamala Harris's weird and jarring, awkward dancing, all triangles and elbows spilling across a dance floor in an attempt to appear human and affable. What's curious, of course, is there's plainly some awareness of the PR perspective of this image because Donald Trump is signing what would have been regarded as a very controversial bill not that long ago, the protection of women's sports. But when you consider that someone like J.K. Rowling, and she's almost a peerless individual in Anglophonic and global culture because she's come up with the artifact of Harry Potter, which is basically sort of like Tolkien or something. There aren't many, Tolkien or George Lucas, there aren't that many people that have made cultural contributions that are that impactful and varied. Now, that also doesn't mean she's a brilliant person well, she's a brilliant person, but it doesn't mean that she's morally unimpeachable, of course. But it does mean you're dealing with an individual that in any sensible culture will be difficult to malign and condemn, particularly if they're saying something that doesn't seem that outrageous. In so much as I don't believe that J.K. Rowling ever hated trans people. I feel that J.K. Rowling was very interested in the rights of women. She's a single mum that's created a global phenomenon that's almost beyond compare, and she has a view on women's rights because she's kind of the age she is and would have gone through cultural moments where women are like, oh, like women aren't being paid enough, or women are maligned, or, you know, like she wouldn't remember women not having a vote, but she'd have a sort of an understandable feminist perspective. And that's when sort of a lot of woke culture started to fall apart in the eyes of many people from a kind of common sense perspective. Hang on a minute, what do we do about, like, weren't we all supposed to be concerned about women's rights or gay people's rights? How come now we're advocating for the medicalisation of trans issues? If you care about, I suppose you do, you're watching me, my personal perspective, I believe in non-judgment and I believe in love. Those are my two principles that I would be guided by. I love it that trans people would come to my shows, but when, as a father, I think about how I would handle it if one of my kids said, I feel like I'm a boy trapped in a girl's body, I'd say, well, let's see how you feel. What do you mean by boy? What do you mean girls? What do you mean? Let's wait a while. We'll work this out when you're a little bit older, mate. It's probably what I would say. And let me know in the comments and chat what you would say as a parent or what you would say as a loving person. So it's complete non-judgment. But when it comes to your role as a person that is charged with the care of a younger individual, what stand would you take? And would you want the government intervening? I mention all of this because there's a conversation on Bill Maher between an MSNBC pundit and Maher himself on this subject that is interesting. Let's see a little more of Donald Trump signing this order. Free speech is under attack, but Rumble Premium refuses to back down. That's why you should use Rumble Premium. Support content creators like me and him and him and him and him. I'm going to say and her, but is there one? And her? Oh, that's good. And her. With major advertisers conspiring to pull their dollars, even brands like Dunkin' Donuts turned their back, claiming Rumble had a right-wing culture. We're not here to fit a mold. We're here to defend free expression. To strengthen this mission, we're excited to offer Rumble Premium, a completely ad-free experience with exclusive benefits. Grow up. For viewers and creators. It's more than a subscription. It's a stand for free speech. Your voice matters. Join Rumble Premium. For a limited time, you can get $10 off an annual plan using the promo code BRAND. Visit rumble.com/premium/brand and claim your discount today. Together we can turn the tide, whether you join Rumble Premium or simply keep watching. Your support helps keep free speech alive. Go to rumble.com/premium/brand and use the code BRAND to get $10 off.
Are you ready? What a nice picture this is, huh, Governor? You ready? We'll do a good job. Wait, let me press that.
I also like that Donald Trump's a person who assesses and evaluates the merits of his own signature. So we're going to do a good job, presses it down. I like, this is going to be a good signature. That he's got like a perspective on his own signature. Like, although it's quite trivial, I also see that as testimony to the sort of ludicrousness of the idea of Trump as a malign person, like an evil person, because it's so sort of human and sort of sweet to care about whether or not your signature is good and to have that kind of direct affinity and affability and relatability around kids. I just can't imagine a person like that withdrawing into some dreadful private place and going, oh, I hate N-words, or Rah. Now, of course, that sort of famous tape of grab them by the P word was an indication that there are levels to people, and indeed all sexual conduct is by its nature intimate and private. And when you bring all sexual conduct into the public sphere, I think it seems a little bit icky, even if it is, as it should be, entirely consensual with people that are able to give consent. So I would say this, when you watch Donald Trump around kids, doesn't it seem like he's in general a pretty lovely person? Let me know what you think about that in the comments and chat, even if you disagree with him politically and a whole host of things, and I'm sure any of us would if we were to scrutinize his political perspectives. But more important than that is, where do you stand on this issue of the protection of women's sports? And what does it mean when a culture can take someone like J.K. Rowling, a sort of like Walt Disney, like a person that you would think is a sort of an icon of a culture, a creator of the culture, abandon them, annihilate them, purder and condemn them, make them a pariah on the basis of opinions that are certainly like reasonable, like in the same way that I would say, oh yeah, if you want to like be trans, that's none of my business and I'll call you whatever you want me to call you. Wouldn't you say that if a person says, no, I actually really believe in protecting women's spaces, you wouldn't go, like the principle of tolerance can't be selectively applied.
Here, intolerance will not be tolerated.
Otherwise, it's not tolerance. It's a kind of expedience. Wouldn't you agree? Let me know in the comments and chat. Let's have a look at Bill Maher's conversation with Chris Hayes, who seems to be a sort of semi-wake, liberalist MSNBC host who's advocating for a kind of my body, my choice perspective on the subject of trans care. Let's go back and look at what Chris Hayes was saying during the COVID pandemic. I bet he was all sorts of let's vax the hell out of these people, and if you're unvaxxed, you're a hater type stuff. I don't know. That's just an aspersion I'm casting on him without real evidential proof. So maybe I'll pause that for a moment. But let's have a look at his conversation with Bill Maher as the ongoing cultural conversation is explored on Bill Maher's Real Time.
But I also think at the same time, there is a message of what I would call like common sense, patriotic pluralism.
Common sense, patriotic pluralism, i.e. patriotic. If you're going to have a country, it's going to have loads of people in it, like 330 million people in it, and they're not all going to believe the same thing. Okay. Common sense means that there is the idea of a universal reason. Now, to have universal reason, you have to have a higher principle, don't you? Even to make claims to common sense, you are sort of saying that there is a God. If you're not saying the word God because you're an atheist or a materialist or whatever, you are saying something that is compounded within the word God. There is an absolute reality, aren't you? Because otherwise you can't have common sense. You can't have common sense unless you're saying there's a consensual, universal, agreed upon reality.
Common sense, patriotic pluralism.
And pluralism, which at some point in this conversation, Chris Hayes says is a synonym for diversity, could also be considered a synonym for variety. Now, variety is beautiful. We have a variety of people, limitless variety in God's creation, limitless variety between all of us as nations, as tribes, as individual people. Diversity suggests opposition between those people. Pluralism is a kind of a word that indicates diaspora. Variety means we are all coming from a single center, one radiant creator, but we are different from one another and we respect these differences.
Yeah. That is a majority message, which is like, if some father and mother have healthcare for their kid lined up who's trans, just stay the fuck out of their business.
Stay the fuck out of it. If some people don't want to get a vaccine because maybe they want to see more clinical data, mind your own business. Particularly if those vaccines haven't been clinically trialed against transmission, then there's no moral component anyway. Mind your own fucking business. Suddenly so cavalier. Suddenly so willing to say, I want the government out of my business. So extraordinary when the entire liberal movement was advocating for authoritarianism on the basis of protection and care. And who is more vulnerable than the children? I often think myself that I don't want, say for example, this is just a thought experiment. Should you be able to drive your car with your children with no seatbelt on if you consider that your driving is safe? Should you? Let me know in the comments and chat. I actually believe that I should be able to do that. I should decide for myself whether my children are safe in the car. Now, I know that there's many questions that could bounce back over the net at me. Well, what if another driver did something? Or what if your children being out of their seat caused them to do something in the car that made you swerve and But that seems to me to be the legitimization of authority rather than the advocacy for sensible authority. However, I would acknowledge that if there was ever a situation where you felt that parents were not correctly looking after their children or even were abusing their children, that you might want some authority to intervene. Would you say that's reasonable? So there is a point where even the belief that I don't think that I want anyone involved in my children's lives other than me and their mother, there's a point where you'd say, but what in instances where those children are being abused or exploited? Now that is the question that's used to legitimize state interventionism. And I would contest this, that therefore any authority has to either be divine or consensual, i.e. democratically elected within agreed parameters. You can't have state intervention unless it's sanctioned by God or mandate. We all agree on that. So let's see where this conversation goes.
Get the fuck out of their business.
I'm in the audience at Bill Maher, and I think I heard something I believe in.
And let them make that decision. That's their decision to make. And you don't have to make that for your family. I'm not going to tell you what to do with your family.
But the argument is whether the child should make the decision.
But the child is never making the decision. The parents are always making the decision. Parents consent to medical care.
Well, here in California, you're allowed to hide it from the parents if the kid is...
Yes.
Thank you, one person who knows that.
But I mean...
Somebody knows that.
Significant difference there, perhaps. And I reckon if we agree that parents are ultimately responsible for their children, then perhaps you can make the argument that Chris Hayes is advancing there. Would you agree with that?
The case.
I think in the vast majority, and we've been hearing from parents right now whose kids' medical care has been interrupted. I think there's a way to talk about...
Well, of course, they would say it's not medical care. They would say it's
what they're saying.
Disfiguring a child.
I think they should mind their own business. I really do. I think they should mind their own business.
Where would the principle of minding your own business appear on a continuum that likely includes propagandization of certain issues? For example, have you noticed over the last 4, 6, 8, 10 years very public advocacy for gender realignment therapies? Have you noticed that? Has it gone beyond the expression of the very human, decent and godly right for individuals to be whoever they are, whoever they feel called to be by God, to express themselves lovingly as long as they're not harming others however they want, a key principle of freedom and salvation, and potentially moved into propagandization, pushing and advocating for those measures? One way to test that would be, are certain states experiencing higher rates of trans kids? And do those states more publicly advocate for trans issues? My children, I want them to be whoever they are. And if my children say to me, I believe that I'm a boy born in a man, whatever, if they don't agree with their sort of biological gender, inverted commas, then I'm going to support them to be whoever they are and whatever they want. But what I would do, and I would make a claim for common sense, is I would say, we're going to wait for a little thing called puberty to happen and adulthood to happen, because your daddy was pretty crazy at various points in life, and I'm glad that I weren't able to make any permanent choices while I was a child, because they may not have been good choices, and you're growing up in an environment where certain things are being amplified perhaps unduly. So the principle has to be derived in a sense from a belief in God. Do you know what I mean? I'm saying love. As long as you're coming from a place of love, whether you're a family member or a participant in the politics of a nation, you're going to be okay. The problem comes when you believe in hate. Now, that's what everyone attributes to a figure like Donald Trump. He's hateful. He hates black people. He hates trans people. He hates women. Does he look hateful when you see him surrounded by children there, signing those things and sort of kind of dopily dishing out the pens? I don't know. You tell me in the comments and the chat. And any parent worthy of the name will do what's best for their children. So I would say, yeah, I don't want the state involved in my children, and I wouldn't command that the state get involved in other people's children. So, in a sense, there is some truth in what Chris Hayes is saying. But when you unpack and follow that, you have to start looking at what's been advocated for and propagandized publicly over the last 4 years. Is that a sensible question? Let me know what you think about that.
I think they should mind their own business. And I think that's true about a lot of things. I think there is this sense in which there was this sort of backlash politics, some of which I understood, some of which people I know felt that way.
So this conversation continues across time. And I reckon if we are tolerant and loving people who believe that our duty here is to spread the kingdom of heaven upon the earth through love and service of one another, we have to remain entirely open, but we have to be alert to the idea of propaganda and the impact of a culture on an individual. If a culture doesn't have an impact on an individual, why have a culture at all? Certainly a culture that would abandon a figure or annihilate or purder a figure like J.K. Rowling is a culture that needs a bloody good looking at, is what I would argue. And when you look at Donald Trump surrounded by kids, it's difficult to see the guy as evil. And if you're determined to see him as evil, then you might want to investigate where those ideas came from. But that's just what I think. Why don't you let me know what you think in the comments and the chat? Hey, thanks for watching. If you want to see more uncensored content where free speech can flourish, join our live stream. Click the link right here to watch the next video if you want to, or become a member of a growing movement. Download the Rumble app and you'll be informed every time we make a new piece of content. Stay free.